inflammation that showed up on your blood test. So let's dive into that. What does that really mean? And so we'll leave our beautiful burning lady for now, and we'll look at some definitions. So let's start with, what does Webster say? Well, a condition in which a part of your body becomes red, swollen, and painful. And examples of that would be, as all of us know, a broken bone, a burned finger, a sore throat. Any of the things in medicine that we define with the word itis at the end, think about that. There are so many of them. Let's just a tiny bit of them. Arthritis, tendinitis, laryngitis, sinusitis, bronchitis. We could go on and on. Hepatitis. So when you hear itis, that is a buzzword that means inflammatory or inflammation state in medicine. So that's not really new, right? I mean, we've had those things forever. Well, what is new is when it becomes chronic. But let's dive just a little more into this definition, and that will help us understand why something that's good, inflammation heals, is not good when it's there all the time. So we're going to really pull that apart, and that will make sense as we go into diseases. So now I'm going to give you a medical definition with some of my interpretation in it. So let's look at this. A local response to cellular injury. So that means some body tissue has been injured. And last night I was cutting onion with apparently not a very good knife. And I have my very own acute inflammation for y'all today. So my cellular tissue was injured by something, and that creates capillary dilation. The blood vessels open up. There's a problem. It could be a burn, it could be a toxin, a bee sting. Think of all those kind of things. And then what happens, we get leukocytic infiltration. That means the white blood cells come rushing to the rescue. Your white blood cells are your cavalry. They're the soldiers. They're coming to take care of whatever's there. What has happened? What do we need to fix? And it creates redness, heat, and pain, right here. And that serves as a mechanism for initiating the elimination of noxious agents. I want everybody to think about that. Noxious agents. If I come up and I burn you right now, that's pretty noxious. And also it repairs the damaged tissue. So we have to understand there is a very good thing about inflammation. Now, as you can see in these pictures, here is a sprained finger. Inflammation in that is wonderful. If we don't have it, it's not going to heal. But if you look at the picture below it, that is not good chronic inflammation. And so I think all of us think of osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, there's that itis again, as chronic. Oh, that's not good. So that's where we look at it. Acute inflammation is an A+. It does what it needs to do, and then it shuts off. The immune system goes, okay, we're done. Chronic inflammation is where the immune system just keeps going and going and going, and it's in high alert. That is deadly. So that's what we're going to look into. So now that we know the difference between them, here's a picture from Time, and this was actually back on their cover like in 2004. So over 10 years ago, this has been all the rage. And what it says on there is the secret killer, the surprising link between inflammation, heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's, and other diseases. What can you do to fight it? So that's where we look at this immune system that has gone haywire. And that's what chronic inflammation is, and it can lead to these diseases. So one thing to think about is that the immune system becomes overreactive. And the best example of this would be pollens in the air. Think back to some of you when you were a kid. Did anybody have allergies? Some of you may be old enough to go, not really. Definitely a few generations back, nobody really had allergies. They really were not reported in the medical literature until the 1800s. And then what happens now, do you know anyone who doesn't have them? It's crazy how many people are reacting to pollens. Pollen is not a deadly force trying to kill us, but the body sometimes acts that way. And then the latest problem we're having is with food, all the food. I don't really like to, there are food allergies, like if I give you a strawberry and you're highly allergic to it, you will be over at the ER in a few minutes. But there's also these allergic reactions that we call sensitivities, and those are epidemic proportions now. And so that would be an overreactive immune system.
What about liver?
That's next, okay? So the next part is what we would call autoimmune diseases. And this is where the body is attacking itself. So autoimmune hepatitis would be inflammation of the liver where the own body's immune system has decided to attack the liver. The other thing that is a very common one is thyroid problems. Hashimoto's thyroid is an epidemic. You know, probably there's a lot of us in this room right now that have it, whether you know it or not. And what has happened is the body has decided that the thyroid is a foreign, noxious problem. And it goes on and on, these autoimmune diseases. Now, then we got another response that can occur. The immune system can decide, I am done looking at all of these noxious problems, and it starts ignoring things. And that would be cancer. Every one of our cells is designed in the innate being of the cell, the DNA, that when it gets old, it should die. Some cells are no longer dying. They become immortal. Well, our immune system is designed to go in and nab those, take them out. When that doesn't happen, those cells grow, and what do we get? Tumors, cancer. It can also happen where it will ignore certain germs that it should have taken care of. An example would be like Lyme's disease, or there's many viruses that can become dormant, like chickenpox and shingles. It can evade the immune system, and sometimes it doesn't take much for it to hide from it. So what we know is that the modern day epidemic is this dysregulated, it's a confused immune system. So, and then I've got a nice little chronic inflammation leads to, and it shows you all these different areas: cancer, cardiovascular, heart, strokes, Alzheimer's, even other brain things like multiple sclerosis, is Parkinson's. All of those are thought to be from chronic inflammation. Many people in the mental health field now consider depression. It can sometimes be from an inflammatory response. Mental illness, all of that can be related or exacerbated by this overreactive or dysregulated immunity. Type 2 diabetes, asthma, pulmonary diseases, and autoimmune. So you may be saying, okay, yeah, I see that. That's everywhere, right? I either have it or my friend has it. I mean, it doesn't take any of us any time to think. Everybody we know seems to be struggling with this inflammation. Well, it may be in your mind, why? Why is this occurring? This didn't happen back at the turn of the century. Nobody has this. If we go to Africa in some village, if you look at the non-industrialized areas, they don't have these problems. These are all from industrialized countries. Well, now we get into a little bit of what Dr. O'Leary interprets from all of her data studying and the things I like to dig into. So I like to study these things. And I think it's a little bit of a Pandora's box is what has happened. And I'm going to read this to you. It says, the definition by Webster of Pandora's box: a process that generates many complicated problems as a result of unwise interference in something. And I think what may have happened is we've developed a lot of things in the medical world and in general. You're very advanced. I mean, think about when you were a kid. Did you ever think you would have as much technology and access to things as you do right now? I mean, these phones we all have, is that not just shocking to you if you really think back when you were a child? Do you ever think you'd access everything in the world like that? Well, I think this is what has happened in medicine too. There was a lot of really good ideas and things we've done very rapidly that the body goes, whoa, I do not know what to do with this. And that's what I'm going to kind of give you an idea, is that most of the experts who study this inflammation would all agree that it is environmental, that there are things that happened that the body has not agreed with or has responded to. And then the controversy really comes into deciding, well, what do we change? We can't go back and undo many of these things. It's out of the box. So sometimes in medicine, we don't like to admit that we let something out of the box. And so that can be a problem too in terms of getting the experts to say, all right, well, what do we do? How do we move forward? And that's where maybe some of the controversies in. I don't think anyone doubts that these are the causes. So what do we do about them? So I listed a few of them for you. Some things, such as infections, can create an autoimmune response. And one of them would be like strep throat. You can get strep throat, and it can all of a sudden engage your immune system to a point that you will start attacking your heart and your kidneys. So some people may have had rheumatic fever in the past. There's various things. So that would be a classic infection that induces that, and there are several different ones. Heavy metals. The American Cardiology Association published probably 8 years ago, stating that heavy metals, the more you've been exposed to heavy metals, the higher your rate for heart disease. And it's one of the #1 causes, which is interesting because I've never gone into a doctor's office and they said, I need to screen you for heavy metals for heart disease. Right? We don't really look at that, even though we know that is a known risk factor. And heavy metals are things like mercury, lead. We'll talk about lead because that's been all in the news lately with the water contamination. That's certainly a big one. There's many others such as arsenic, cadmium. Many of the pesticides that have been sprayed on the lands for years are full of those things. The wine growers in California were sued a couple of years ago for putting arsenic in the wine to prevent growth. You think, why would they do that? Well, sometimes, the things we do in a small amount don't seem to be a problem, and it seemed legal and okay. But what happens with repeated exposures from many different areas, the body burden of toxicity increases. So in and of itself, do I think the wine growers have caused all of our inflammation? Absolutely not. It's not one problem. It's many, many, many that are accumulating in the body. And once we get these heavy metals in our body, we can't get rid of them. They're stored in our fat tissue and other areas. Same thing with chemicals. I read that there's over 2,000 new chemicals produced every year by chemical engineers. And so many of those things we can't tolerate. The body doesn't know what to do with them. Pesticides, medications. I saw something very interesting 2 weeks ago in the Seattle Times where they were advising people not to eat the salmon anymore because they were full of the breakdown products of psychotropic drugs. So many of our water systems have no way to clean the water. Most people don't realize industrial or municipal water cleaning, they don't even have the technology to filter the hormones that women using birth control or hormonal medicines, when they urinate and that gets back into the water table, they can't filter that. The technology doesn't even exist for that. So the things we're exposed to are way beyond what most people realize. Food additives, the food chemical engineers are very rampant in making new things to make guacamole more smooth and enhance the flavor, MSG. And we're learning very quickly that a lot of those are very toxic to the body, especially not in and of itself. It's not going to kill you right now, but the more you are exposed to these things and your liver is tied up trying to clear out other things, it doesn't have time for things that shouldn't be a big deal. So think of it that way. It's not that the MSG is going to make you fat or give you a migraine right now, although there are some people who will get an immediate migraine, and that's probably because they're very toxic from other things. It's the accumulation over time. Same thing with vaccines. We won't get off on that because that's certainly a hot topic. But what does a vaccine do? We are creating an immune response. So we have parts of an infection along with aggravating noxious stimuli such as aluminum, other things, and then we inject those in high amounts during childhood. So you can see how they stimulate the immune system. Pollutants, even natural disasters, that is aggravating. Dust, simple things, smoke, other things like that that can happen that we have no control over. And then let's not forget electromagnetic radiation. We're in here with the Wi-Fi and all of that. We know that that affects immune function. That's well proven. And then stress. The hormone cortisol goes up when we're stressed, and that makes our white blood cells very sluggish. And if you've ever noticed that, a lot of times when you're very stressed, what happens? You're more prone to get sick. Like shingles, for example. What do people always say? That virus reactivates under times of stress. And what I find is interesting is we see shingles outbreaks and things like that in kids now. It's happening younger and younger. So just think of it from that standpoint. It's not just that one of these things is a horrible problem we need to get rid of. We just need to see how can we minimize these toxic exposures. And that would be the burden that the body has to deal with. And then the other component to all of this is each one of us have a very unique genetic makeup. And so what I'm able to tolerate and put up with and be fine with may be very different from you. And all of these things happen, change our DNA over time. So if my parents and my grandparents were just heavily exposed to toxins, each subsequent generation will be weaker. Now on a positive note, everything that we do changes our DNA too. Especially if we eat a lot of vegetables, we're doing very healthy things, we are improving that DNA. So, not to leave you in a dismal state, you may think, oh my goodness, we're doomed. No, we don't want to leave here feeling that way, but we do want to be aware. And then just the last thing on this part is we want to think of everything. The water we're drinking, that's been brought to everyone's attention now. The food we're eating, what's in it, where did it come from, what were the animals eating, because all of that passes on to us. The air, what's the air quality, and then what happens in the womb. We used to think that toxins didn't pass into the babies. Now we know on cord blood, there's hundreds and hundreds of chemicals, crazy chemicals in a brand new baby just entering the world. And then our gut, the effect of what's happening to our gut is very important. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So you may be thinking, all right, am I inflamed? Do I have this problem? Well, we probably all do to some extent. How do we figure this out? There is no specific one test that you can use to know your inflammatory burden. That's probably a good word for it. How much burden of inflammation do I have? So I listed here some of the ones that have been around for a while to kind of get you thinking about it. In the first category, we have things like a SED rate or just a regular old cholesterol profile and a blood count, looking at white blood cells. Very simple, inexpensive tests. They're very nonspecific and they're probably very minimally useful for a healthy person. We would use these to follow someone that's sick and we wanted to see how their inflammatory markers were going. So more for a risk evaluation, I list some of the other tests just so you would know, and this is not comprehensive by any means, but these are some of the ones I use. I like to use expanded cholesterol profiles where you can look at how big the particles are of the cholesterol. I also like to use what's called a CRP test. It shows how much inflammation is going on in the body. One of my favorite ones looks at the omega-3, omega-6 index. And that would be, you know how everyone tells you, you need to eat fish oil, right? You hear that all the time. Everybody should take fish oil. Well, why are they saying that? It's about that omega-3 test. We know that the type of fat you have in your cells is very important. And the people with the most omega-3 type fat have the lowest heart and stroke risk, and that's been well proven. The Mediterranean countries do the best with this. And if you think about it, they have a lot of really awesome oil sources. One of them on the Mediterranean, they have fish, and they have a lot of olive oil. All of those are anti-inflammatory. The countries who do the worst, Canada and the US. So we have the highest rates of heart disease and strokes. So that's one of my favorite ones. A lot of people didn't even know and I didn't know for years that you could actually measure that test off of a little blood stick off your finger. So pretty easy test to get. Homocysteine is another very common test that many doctors will run this one. And I really like it a lot because it tells me how much folate, which is a very important B vitamin for detoxification. So that's a good one that I love to follow. An A1C is a blood sugar test. All diabetics will be like, oh yeah, I know that one real well. I measure that on everybody at least once a year because then it gives me an idea of how much insulin is in their blood. Insulin is inflammatory, so I don't want it to be high. And then you can measure insulin. I don't tend to get that one. The A1C is cheaper and I like to use it. There's also autoimmune antibodies. You can measure these cells that are attacking like the liver, You can measure those, the thyroid, it goes on and on. Every time I turn around, there's more autoimmune antibody tests available. Those can get very expensive if you start drawing big panels on them, so I don't use them all the time, just in unique situations. I do love urinary oxidative stress markers. These are the cleaning crew. They tell you how much overworked and underpaid are your cleaning agents. Glutathione is the top compound in our body. Our body makes it, and it cleans up the blood. And so you can actually measure those off of a urine test. So I use that quite a bit. Interleukins, all of those are big inflammatory panels, very common. And then nutritional markers to see is the body stores where it needs to be, or are we getting depleted. So that's just to give you an idea that there's a whole world out there of looking at this inflammatory cascade to see where you stand on it. All right, so now let's talk about what can we do. Now that we've got an idea about this, and I limited it to 3 things and then expanded on. The most important thing is to eat real food. The body recognizes plants and real food, and that's the bottom line on it. So the more plants you're eating, the more colorful they are, the better it's going to be. You want to eat a rainbow of color, because what's in something that's super green is going to be different nutrition that you get from a purple eggplant or a red tomato. So you want to try to eat a rainbow every day. The things that have the most fiber in them are going to be better too. Fiber is like a scrub brush for your intestines. Your intestines, they like shag carpet, and they get just full of yuck. And if you send fiber down there, it's like it's teasing that junk out of there. And so you want as much fiber as you can. So it's better to have a green apple or an apple than it would be to have the juice. The juice is not going to do that, and it's going to be very high and concentrated in the natural sugars, whereas you get all that fiber in the apple. So trying to eat real food is important. Nuts and seeds, I cannot say enough about eating those. I heard a cardiologist talk a couple of months ago, and he was reporting on a study he did, and he said that if Americans would eat a handful of nuts or seeds twice a week, they would lower cardiovascular disease in the U.S. by 45%.
Wow.
So that's, a quarter cup a day is what I usually recommend. You have to be careful. Sometimes people say, Dr. O'Leary, I gained 10 pounds in 3 months. Well, I didn't say eat the whole container. You do have to measure them in a little moderation in all things, even that which is good. And really rotate your seeds too. Everybody says, what's the best nut? What's the best seeds? It's like the vegetables. You can't just narrow it down to a few. You need the rotation, because each one's unique in what it's going to bring to you. So work on that. The other thing is I love spices. Curcumin is the active ingredient in turmeric. If one of us were having a heart attack and we were in India right now, they would run curcumin through the IV. So the more curcumin you can get, the better. It's great for inflammation. The only thing I'll say about spices, all of them are great. Use as many as you can. You have to be careful though, when you buy a spice in a little can off the shelf, it's been irradiated. There's a reason it has a shelf life. So that does damage some of the anti-inflammatory effects of it. So you want to learn to either grow your own spices would be best, or you can buy them from many, many places, Whole Foods, all of those, probably the Peach Basket I bet has great sources, or you can order them online that are in bulk and they haven't been irradiated. They're going to be much more healthy for you and help you with this goal. And then I like to wash things down with herbal teas. All kinds of wonderful teas. Green tea is a fabulous thing. If you say, well, I don't like hot tea, that's fine. You can make it into a cold tea. Make your own brew. Find some herbal teas that you enjoy and try to drink them every day. The people who live the longest, we study them. They live in what we call blue zones. Okinawa would be one example. And what we find is that those people, besides moving a lot, they're always out working on the land. They drink an immense amount of teas from roots of the plants. So that's one thing we can do too. If somebody, a lot of times people say, well, what kind of diet do you want me to be on? What do we call this? If you want a word for this, you can, or you like to Google and get recipes. Autoimmune or paleo or anti-inflammatory foods or diet will give you more examples of what I'm talking about if you want to use Google. A couple of notes. What are the things we need to avoid? Anything that makes your insulin hormone go high is bad for you. Nobody disagrees with that statement. I mean, we love the way it tastes, but it is very bad and it will create inflammation. Those would be sugar and anything with wheat. Wheat flour and sugar are horrible stimulators of insulin. A piece of bread, wheat bread, will make your insulin go higher than a Snickers bar. I'm not suggesting you eat the Snickers bar. Just go get the handful of nuts and some dark chocolate and call it good, okay? So, but we need to really be aware of that. I know we all love those products, but it is an epidemic problem that we're seeing. So, and then change the oil. We talked about that. You want a good oil change. You want lots of good, healthy fats, and I listed those for you: olive oil, flaxseed. Flaxseed is wonderful, especially if you've ever had it or you're worried about cancer. You need to be eating flaxseed. Excellent studies. They use flaxseed in Germany to treat breast cancer, and there are phenomenal studies on it. What I like to do is get 2 tablespoons of flaxseed and soak it in almond milk. You got to let it soak a long time, like overnight. Drizzle just a little honey, or you may be fine, and then eat that. Eat that 2 or 3 times a week. Then you get the whole of the seed, and that is very anti-inflammatory. And you really develop a taste for it. All right, and then know your nutritional status. We talked about that. Are my vitamins, my minerals, the antioxidants, are they where they need to be? Quality sleep. Nothing goes well if you're not getting good sleep. So I spend a lot of time helping people reestablish good sleep patterns. It's an epidemic problem in our country, is not sleeping well. Dealing with stress is very important. If cortisol is high, nothing's going to go well. That's a hard one. So I listed down there some of my favorite things to deal with these issues. Exercise, scheduling time to relax. Put it on the schedule. You're important. I know you have a million things to do, but you'll do them so much better if you have a 15, 20-minute window that is your time to relax, listen to good music. Sauna is a wonderful way to detox. We have one at the clinic that we put in because I love it so much. Prayer, meditation, any of those things where you're calming down the mind are unbelievable data supporting the benefits of those things. Overuse of electronics is a very big problem. We all find ourselves getting addicted to those things very quickly. We need to limit that. Being outdoors, huge for the health. Going outside, be barefoot. Unless they just spray pesticides all the time. And then work on your gut. Everybody needs to work on the gut. Our gut bugs are the key to how we live and how healthy we are, and we want good bacteria in that gut. So feed them well. Learn about if you've got food sensitivities, hidden infections, all of those things. And then on this page, which you have a copy of, I've put down some resources that if this is interesting to you, that you might want to go and look up and delve into a little more. And two, some things to back up what I'm saying. I put a few videos on there. That second one on toxins that babies are exposed to, it's a short little video, really powerful information. Why do I really need to buy organic? I gave you something to look at there. I've got a couple other documentaries. Genetic Roulette, I really like that movie. I found it very helpful. Food additives making us fat and inflamed. 8 foods that trigger inflammation. And then my favorite recipe site, Civilized Cavemen, I also like drax.com. So those will give you a few little things that you can get into a little more with. And with that, I did pretty good on time. I can keep talking, but I'm going to stop and I'm going to let you guys take a minute and ask anything you want. You can be about this or something else if you're having interest. Yes, ma'am.
4 second questions. With the nuts and the seeds, I have read or heard that peanuts might not be as good as some of the others, that they could actually cause inflammation. Have you read anything?
That's true. Peanuts are not really a nut. They're a legume. And they have a coating on them that some people are very sensitive to. It's somehow related to blood type and whether you can deal with these lignans that cover it. The same thing with beans, lentils. For some people, they're actually more inflammatory than beneficial.
Could you tell that by eating them or not necessarily?
Usually not. Usually we have to test for that. In fact, what I've found is the people who are reactive to them tend to crave them. Ooh. Now, I had a kid who made immense amounts of peanut butter, and I thought he was so healthy from it, and he was very reactive to it when I actually measured it.
Thank you.
Good question.
Could you, of course, I'd like to know about nuts and dark chocolate.
Okay, so the studies say that 2 ounces of dark chocolate is healthy for most people on a daily basis. Now keep in mind, 2 ounces is one of those squares. If we went over and we bought that really nice whatever brand, and we broke it off, that would be 2 ounces. And then, so what we tend to do at my house is I'll buy a bunch of, I usually buy raw or sea salt and olive oil seasoned is what if I'm going to, on my nuts and seeds. And I'll buy a variety of them, and I have a big container that I put them all in, and I'll take the dark chocolate morsels. It's the red package, and I'm forgetting, it starts with a G. It's not Ghirardelli, but it's another G or Gerard or something like that. It's a real clean dark chocolate, like a baking morsel, like you would use. And I'll dump that in and then shake it all up, and then my kids will scoop that out and they'll take that for snack. And they don't feel deprived because they're getting, you got a little sea salt, so you got the salty taste, you got the chocolate, and I don't see any problem with that. I've never had anybody have problems.
So is it 100% of cacao?
Well, I usually don't recommend, that's what I usually buy, 90 to 100%. When we first started all of this, I haven't known this my whole life, and if you're used to milk chocolate, you are not going to like the taste of the dark. It is a journey. Those taste buds will change, but the higher the percent, the better. And I would say get at least 70.
Okay.
Where do you shop?
I do a lot of online shopping. I do ship things to my house. However, our H-E-B has an immense amount of good products. And I'll tell you the other thing I noticed is Walmart. Probably a year ago, I was in there, and a man in a suit came up, and he started, of all people, I happened to be in there, and he's like, "Do you think organic is important?" I'm like, "Oh, let me give you an earful." And you can tell he was like, "Okay, lady, that's enough. Move on. I gotta ask somebody else." So, but even Walmart now, I noticed they had soups the other day, and they had their little organic flag out. These products are coming out.
Can you trust that?
Well, it's like everything. We can't control it all. We just have to make the best decision with what we have. And I do think if you're struggling with inflammation, you have to start learning this. People do get overwhelmed of, I can't control the water and the food and all of it. No, but if you can decrease the body's burden a little bit, it is remarkable what your liver can do to clean up the mess. You just got to take the pressure off of it and give it some fuel for what it needs to heal. So I try not to get too caught up with, do I look up every single brand I buy? Well, I personally do. I don't recommend y'all do that. But in the more awareness that comes, the more these companies are being held to the accountability. And there was a study, a very interesting study on school kids in New York City. And the first half of the year, they just ate their regular cafeteria food. And they measured their urine samples, the parents who enrolled in this, and then the second half they put them on all organic vegetables and fruits to the best that they could from their supplier. And it was amazing how those levels of pesticides and everything plummeted at 6 months into it. Yes, ma'am.
What is your feeling about the sprouted grains? Is that just as bad as sprouted wheat grains?
Well, okay, in general, I think that's better. But when I'm dealing with someone who comes in for autoimmune or inflammation problems, they're worried about that, they don't feel good, I always do a food sensitivity blood test on them first. Because what I find is that most people don't tolerate grains at all. Their gut is in such shambles that any grain is pretty inflammatory to them. And so then I work on healing their gut, and then I give them some of the grains back. I rarely ever give wheat back, unless they're willing to move to another country where the wheat is different, where they get a different variety of wheat than what's standard in the U.S.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am?
My husband is diabetic. He's type 1 and type 2. So we try to explain to him the food he's eating that he likes. I told him, you gotta watch what you eat. He said, Lynn, I know that. I said, okay then, you ain't doing it. So how can I help my husband and control his diabetes?
Okay, so that's the topic I'm giving tonight at my own clinic, and it's called stress eating. So food is very addictive, especially wheat and sugar. That is well known. It has, in fact, there are things in wheat that mimic, they're called glutamorphins, and they're opioids. So it's just, it hits the same part of the brain as morphine and heroin. Well studied, you can Google this and read all about them, don't make this stuff up. Same thing in milk and dairy products, there's casomorphins. And so many people are truly addicted to the food. And it's usually not the good food. Nobody is addicted to broccoli, right? I mean, that's unfortunately the problem. Those compounds are not typically in the vegetables. And then, so that is a real struggle that many people have. They know what to do, but doing it is it's up here. It takes a lot of work. So yeah, that's a hard one. But it doesn't mean you don't stop trying. You have to keep trying. It's just like somebody trying to stop smoking. Well, if I tried that once, it didn't work. Well, do you just give up? No, you keep trying, you keep working on it. And there's tons of things on there on food addictions. If you Google and read that, there are so many people working on the psychology of food. There's Psychology of Food Institute. All of those have great information sources. But the person doing it has to be the one that's ready to do it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I love salmon, and when you mentioned salmon earlier in your presentation, it made me wonder if the organic salmon was better and or safe.
Okay, so what we know, there are certain companies, and I want to say it's called Wild Planet. There's many others that test, and they publish their data. They're proud of what they do, that it's clean, and so you can still get it. Farmed fish is not helping you. Don't buy it, just don't eat it. It's not worth it. Wild caught's going to be better, and what I personally buy is I get at Costco or order online and ship to my house is the canned wild, and it's the Wild Planet. I'm pretty sure it has a little earth on it. And there's several other ones you can look at too. If you go to, and I've got that on that other sheet, the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, that's a really good resource to bookmark. Let me go back one and I'll show it to you. Yeah, that second one, they also did that 10 Americans video I told you about, the babies born with all the toxins. The Environmental Working Group puts out wonderful free information. They have what's called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. So they'll tell you what to buy, what's worth spending money on organic, and what doesn't really matter. That doesn't tend to take up the pesticides. They'll also tell you things on the fish. What companies do we know they've studied that have clean, mercury-free fish? They'll give you things on products like lotions and sunscreens, and I mean, a lot of times we don't even think about something you put on every single day, and if there's a lot of chemicals in that, that adds to the burden. So think of chemical or toxic, noxious stimuli. Remember our definition of inflammation? Am I adding to my burden or am I lessening it? We're not going to eliminate it. You cannot be toxin free, and you don't need to be. The body can handle this. We've just got to limit it as much as we can.
Green tea, if you don't want the caffeine, what are your feelings about decaffeinated green tea?
There's some controversy on that because of the decaffeination process. I'm not a big stickler on things like that. I think decaffeinated green tea is better than what most of the people I see drink, so I'm okay with it. But in the big scheme of things, there is a little controversy.
Thank you.
What else? What other burning thoughts, questions?
I know you all have some, surely.
You can ask anything.
You can ask her anything.
Yeah, it doesn't.
How can you sweeten green tea?
The best sweeteners, that's a great question. I get that one quite a bit. So I am a fan of stevia. But you have to be careful with stevia. Stevia is a plant. It grows in my front yard. I planted it, and you can pick the leaves. Like for a while, it was hard to get the plants to grow because my kids would eat the leaves. It's pretty strong too. The deer won't even eat it, but the kids do. So stevia, it's an acquired taste. Most people who are used to having corn syrup every day, it's not going to make the dopamine rush like the bad corn syrup. So if you don't like stevia, the other things that are helpful would be honey, real honey. Be careful. There for a while, the honey from China, it was corn syrup flavored to look like honey. So you need real honey. So that would be good. Real maple syrup, I tend to use that. I will occasionally, I'll cook with organic cane sugar. That's easy to get, and it's non-GMO, and I find that that's not as big a problem.
Somebody told me once that the honey from your area helps with allergies.
I've worked with allergist Dr. Pete for a while, and I asked him about that, and he said he didn't really have any scientific evidence, but anecdotally, a lot of people do say that, and it makes sense, because if you're getting a little bit of that every day, whatever they've been in from your area, your immune system will usually downregulate. So there is some good thought and evidence of that. There's just no science behind it. That's okay. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of bread would you recommend to eat?
Well, the bread that I think is the best would be a homemade, made with non-wheat flours. So we tend to do things with coconut flour, almond flour, amaranth would be a flour I would use. If I have to buy bread, which sometimes I do, I tend to get the frozen ones, like Udi's is the one in my house that we'll use in a pinch.
HEB has gluten-free bread.
Yes, that's
Yes.
where they
And it's
do.
really good.
And you get used to it. I mean, it is a transition if you're used to this squishy, really soft stuff with lots of gluten, but you get used to
They
it.
have HEB, in addition to the UD gluten-free bread in the freezer, they have another gluten-free bread that's very, very soft, and I haven't read the label yet. Someone just brought me a piece, and I just cannot imagine that it would be good for us because
You're
I
wondering
think
what chemicals in
yeah,
that.
it's so soft and it tastes like, you know.
That bread they have in the bakery section is very good.
Well, what I would say, what's in the bakery section is made with American wheat flour. So I personally would not eat that. Or
Have you tried that
but
bread?
it tastes good. Oh, the gluten-free?
Gluten-free bread,
Oh,
yeah.
I've not
It is
had
really
that
good.
bakery gluten-free.
If they don't have it all the
Have you tried
time,
that?
I've just bought a lot today.
Well, I'm gonna have to look for that.
Starts with an S.
When you say no bread, but then you said gluten-free, so bread is okay if it's gluten-free?
Well, no, it's a better choice. Now remember, just because something is gluten-free, it is not carbohydrate-free. And carbohydrates, especially simple carbohydrates like bread or pasta or crackers, make insulin go up. And what was insulin? Inflammatory.
Yeah.
So gluten-free is less toxic, but it's still a carbohydrate. You still got to control it. You wouldn't want to be eating it every day.
What about like the quinoa pasta, something like that?
That's what I tend to buy
What
and
is
use
that?
that, like
Quinoa.
quinoa based.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything like that will be a little bit better. Now, I will tell you, if your gut is not working properly, and you're eating, you switch over to these products, you can develop sensitivities to quinoa, to rice, to all the others too. Yeah, it's never a simple answer, right? But the more you rotate and keep working on it, it will heal.
Would you spell that quinoa for people who may not be familiar with it?
It's Quinoa. So it looks like quinoa, but it's quinoa. And it's actually a seed is what it is.
Okay,
It's a
can you
seed.
just find out again?
Quinoa.
And HEB has it.
Oh, yeah.
Just don't cook it as long as the other pasta because it'll get mushy.
Yeah, it cooks quicker. It's actually nice for cooking with.
May we know your source of the stevia plants?
I bought those plants several years ago. They come back year round. And I want to say it was in Kerrville at the Lowe's. They're easy to find.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was Kerrville
Natural
Lowe's.
Gardener in Austin.
We'll totally have them. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, a while back on Shark Tank, there was a couple of ladies that now have a bee-free honey that is made from apples. And I guess it's organic too, but it's supposed to come out in Costco in the fall. But it helps save the honeybees.
Well, that's what I was going to say. There's such a problem. Our bees are dying off for the same reasons, right? They're very sensitive to these chemicals and these things that have contaminated the earth at horrendous levels. And we are losing the bees quickly. And that's a real tragedy because the bees actually improve our bacterial counts and their honey improves our intestine. So, but
that should be okay, should it, since it is a fruit?
well, I don't know. A lot of times when you concentrate a fruit,